challenging. It's exhausting at times, as all parents in here can attest to. But whether it's playing a friendly game at home, whether it's just spending time together, like even if it's watching some sort of TV show, like my kids, they went through this stage in their life to where they love Disney Channel shows, right? Like I'm sorry, but Disney Channel shows are absolute trash. Disney Channel or Disney movies can be okay. Disney Channel shows are hopeless. Like they're a lost cause. So, but I just love spending time with my family. It doesn't matter what we're doing. Just being around them gives me this sense of calm and this sense of peace. But especially as my kids have gotten older, I think one of my favorite things about being a dad is actually whenever my kids are hurting. I love whenever my kids are conflicted. I love whenever they're scared. I love whenever they're feeling some kind of pain. I know that sounds kind of weird in different things, but the reason that I love those times is because it's in those moments, it's in those precious moments that I'm able to hopefully speak some sort of truth into my children's life that will encourage them and help them see their life and see this world in perhaps a new way, to see their trials and their pain in perhaps a new way. So anytime one of these conversations presents themselves, one of these opportunities presents themselves, the conversation normally ends with me asking them this question: do you trust me? Do you trust me when I offer advice? Do you trust that I love you? Do you trust that I want what's best for you? Do you trust me when I tell you that it's going to be okay? That regardless of what happens right now, it's going to be okay. Do you trust me? If you remember last night, we opened up by talking about this foundational parable of this farmer who goes out and scatters seed. The farmer represents God and the message, and the seed represents the message of the kingdom of heaven, the message of the hope that is available in Jesus. And the soil represents different kinds of the environment of our hearts, different kinds of soil of our hearts and how we receive this message. You have the path, which represents this hard heart, this unreceptive heart. You have this rocky soil, which I call the superficial heart. Like it starts off so hot, and then it loves Jesus so much, but as soon as pain and trials and some sort of unfortunate circumstances arise, all of a sudden that begins to cool and to fade and to go away. You have the thorny soil, which is the divided heart. It's not that you don't love Jesus. It's that you just love a whole lot of other stuff just as much or more than you love Jesus. It's not that your allegiance isn't to Jesus. It's just that your allegiance is to many other things in addition to Jesus. But then you have the good soil, which is the kingdom worker heart, which produces a harvest of 30, 60, or even 100 times. But then you have, following this foundational parable, Jesus, he goes and he compares the kingdom of heaven to a mustard seed and to yeast. And both of these things, in and of themselves, they seem pretty insignificant. The mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds, but it grows into this external growth, into this large plant. And this yeast, this tiny little thing, it's able to work internally to completely transform the dough. So both of these things, they come from fairly insignificant beginnings, but they end up growing externally, and they end up transforming internally. And so Jesus, he's talked about how the kingdom of heaven is, what it's like and how it's received by different kinds of hearts. But today we're going to hear Jesus tell us what the only proper response is to the kingdom of heaven in our own lives. And the reason this is so important is because Jesus' broadcast isn't just news about his kingdom, but it's an invitation to join in his kingdom, to join in the moving of his kingdom. So if you have a Bible or a phone or whatever, go ahead and open up to Matthew chapter 13. We're going to read these few verses that Coach read a little bit earlier, verses 44 through 46. It says that the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy, he went and sold all that he had, and he came back and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. And when he found one of great value, he went away and he sold everything that he had. And then he came back and he bought it. So in this first story, we see the story of a man who discovers this treasure in a field. And while that may sound strange to us in a day of safety deposit boxes and banks and all those things, and in this day it was not uncommon at all for somebody to go and take what they considered to be extremely valuable and just try and find a place to hide it. In fact, today, my wife's grandpa, I'm not going to tell you where he lives, but as supposedly he has a lot, but none of it's in a bank. He's literally just gone throughout his property and hidden all of his treasure in coffee cans all around. And so that's what's going on here. Jesus is telling this parable in a day whenever that would have been completely understood. Instead of putting their greatest possessions in these safe places, they would go and put them in these remote places. And many believe that in this first story, Jesus was talking about a common man, a common day worker who is plowing the field, and he's plowing a field that he does not own. He's likely working for a wealthy landowner. But when he comes upon this treasure that is hidden in the field, it's then that he realizes that he has stumbled upon something great. He wasn't looking for something great, but he stumbled upon something great, and immediately he leaves. And in his joy, he holds this massive yard sale to sell everything that he owns so that he can go back and buy the field in which the treasure is buried. This was not a man of great wealth, but a working man who had found something that was worth losing everything for. The second story is a man of great means. This man was a merchant. He was a businessman. He would buy and sell. That's what he did. He was out looking for fine pearls. But what he came upon, he didn't expect. It was the mother lode. It was the finest pearl that he had ever seen. And so whenever he finds this, what he had been looking for, he immediately leaves, sells all that he has, and returns to buy the pearl. So this was a man of great wealth, but he too had found something worth losing everything for. These stories, they're so similar, and the first common theme that we see in both of these parables is this act of discovery. In one case, the act was intentional. In the other case, it was unintentional. But in both cases, they find this treasure, and so we have rich and we have poor, we have wandering and we have seeking. We have found both who have found something worth losing everything for. Listen, Jesus is telling us that the kingdom of God is like a treasure you can discover. But once it's found, something must happen. You can't just walk by, as there's this sense of overwhelming joy in this act of discovery of the treasure. The first parable, it even goes on to say that in his joy, you see in both stories, they document the joy of finding the treasure, but they do not focus on the loss of everything that they own. But you can't overlook the loss of everything they own. It's in both of these stories. But listen, once you discover God's kingdom and experience the joy of finding it, there must be a response. And that response is known as dying to yourself. Both they went and sold everything that they had, the accumulation of all the stuff that they had gathered throughout all their lives, all those gifts that had been given by loved ones, all those purchases that they had saved up for months to be able to go buy, all the mementos and the sentimental items. They went and they sold it all. Because everything was no longer worth anything in comparison to the kingdom of heaven. And this is what dying to yourself looks like. This is the value of the kingdom, because it is a treasure of such incomparable worth, of such incomparable value, that nothing else matters compared to it. But church, I fear that far too often, instead of seeing the beauty that is the kingdom of heaven, instead of seeing the beauty that is the value of the treasure of the kingdom of heaven, too often we just walk by and we continue to leave it buried in a field. We just keep on shopping. We just keep looking around. Our agendas remain our agendas. If our agenda just happens to align with God's agenda, that's cool, that's fine, but that's not our goal. Our dreams remain our dreams, and if our dreams end up aligning with God's dreams for our lives, then that's fine, but that's not the goal. Our goals remain our goals, and if they happen to align with God's goals for our lives, for God's goals for humanity, then that's fine, but that's not our goal, because we just hold on to what's ours. We hold on to what we see belongs to us and what we hold most dear, and all the while there's this treasure and this pearl of great value that just sits there, unappreciated, undervalued, unused. And so our hope this week is not just to learn about the kingdom of God, but our hope this week is that you come to know the supreme nature of the King. Because what we see in both of these parables is that the King wants you to put his kingdom first in your life. Why is this so important? Because this King loves you more than you could ever begin to comprehend. Because this King values you more than anything you could ever value in this life. Because this King knows what's best for you. Because this King longs to use you in the moving of his kingdom. Don't you know, whenever the neighbors saw these men coming home and immediately just bringing all their possessions into the front yard, don't you know that everybody thought that these guys were absolutely crazy? I mean, that's a little much, isn't it? Couldn't you have saved something? But these men knew exactly what they were doing. Both of them, the one who was looking and the one who just happened to stumble upon something great, both of them knew that they had found something worth losing everything for. I want to read you something that Jesus said in Luke chapter 14. He said this about what it means to be a disciple. Listen, Luke 14, beginning in verse 27. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. The cross, the symbol of suffering and shame. Whoever does not come and carry their cross, they cannot be my disciple. He goes on, verse 28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose the king, he's about to go out to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one who is coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off, and he will ask for terms of peace. And then listen, verse 33. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything, you have, you cannot be my disciple. So what about you? Do you believe the kingdom of heaven is something worth losing everything for? If yes, do you live as though the kingdom of heaven is something worth losing everything for? Because I don't want to kind of hoodwink you or trick you into anything. I want to be honest with you. The kingdom of heaven will cost you everything. It means that you must surrender your will and your desires to the will and the desires of Jesus Christ. It means that you must surrender your version of what's right and what's wrong to Jesus and his version of what's right and what's wrong. It means that you must surrender what you believe to be true to what Jesus says is true. But don't miss this. The kingdom of heaven is so costly. But it is also so worth it. It's almost as if in this parable Jesus is asking, do you trust me? Do you trust me with your life? Do you trust that Jesus is who Jesus says that he is? Do you trust that Jesus really cares for you? Do you trust that Jesus wants what's best for you? Do you believe that Jesus knows what's best for you? Do you trust that Jesus is Lord? Do you trust that Jesus really lived, really died, and really resurrected from the dead? Do you trust that Jesus can save you? And do you trust what Jesus said about the kingdom of God? Do you trust that the kingdom of heaven is worth what Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is worth? If the answer is yes, then today you have found something worth losing everything for.